Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the JIRCAS International Symposium 2023. We warmly welcome you today, whether you are attending in person or online. My name is Ayuchi Tamura, and I will be the MC for today's symposium. To begin with, I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Osamu KOYAMA, President of JIRCAS. He will be giving you the opening remarks on behalf of the organizer of the symposium. Mr. KOYAMA, please.
Distinguished participants, good afternoon. It's my great honor to open the JIRCAS International Symposium 2023, organized under the auspices of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, and the Forest and Forest Products Research Institute. On behalf of JIRCAS, the organizer, I'd like to thank today's distinguished guest, Mr. KOSAKA Zentaro, Deputy Director General of the Forestry Agency, and Dr. NAKASHIZUKA Toru, Director General of the Forestry and Forest Products Research Institute. Today's keynote speakers, Professor KITAJIMA Kaoru, Vice Dean of the Graduate School of Agriculture, Kyoto University, and Dr. Sonya Dewi, Director of Asia Program of CIFOR-ICRAF, and all the distinguished speakers for the two sessions for their strong support and enormous contribution to this symposium. I'd like to also thank all of you who are attending today's symposium, both online and on-site here, for generously taking your precious time to joining us today. Tropical forest, which accounts for an estimated 40 to 50% of terrestrial vegetation, contribute to the stabilization of global system through their ability to absorb and store carbon, a vital function for the survival of human society in the face of climate crisis, as well as through their multiple functions, including biodiversity, disaster prevention, water resource conservation, material production such as timber, and even cultural formation. However, the relentless overexploitation of natural resources and the conversion of tropical forest to farmland continue unabated. Deforestation and forest degradation caused by human economic activities contribute to global warming through the release of carbon stored in trees and soils, and to the loss of biodiversity through the destruction of ecosystem. And these feedback loops may result in the malfunction of global climate and environmental controlling system we call Earth system. In recent years, international conferences and negotiations on climate change countermeasures and biodiversity conservation have emphasized the need for resource management that strengthen the climate and environmental regulation functions of a tropical forest, as well as the need for the rules to control deforestation associated with the forest industry. The function and resources of tropical forest are indispensable asset to our society. Therefore, their conservation is important. However, The socio-economic activities associated with industries using tropical forests are equally important. I believe achieving both is the key for preventing deforestation and forest degradation. To this end, we need to create holistic and inclusive innovations that will lead to both the conservation of environment and the realization of sustainable forest and forest-related industries. This is the reason why we selected the title of this year's symposium. JIRCAS plays a central role in international collaboration in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, and aims to contribute to achieve the SDGs through the development of technologies to address various challenges in Asia, Africa, Latin American regions. As a part of these efforts, we are promoting international collaborative research and cooperation in tropical forest and forest industry, mainly in Asia region. We are conducting research projects which includes the social implementation of research results for the people who live on tropical forest. For example, the project handling genetic resources for productivity and adaptability of the forest, or utilization of genetic resources capable of climate change adaptation, or sustainable or replantation of oil palm, and so on. In today's symposium, distinguished tropical forest researchers from Asia and around the world will present and discuss the opportunities and challenges of balancing tropical forest resilience and forest industry sustainability. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Japan-ASEAN Friendship and Cooperation, and we hope that focusing on tropical forests in Asia will lead to innovation from ASEAN countries that can contribute to our common goal. Furthermore, this year marks the 30th anniversary of JIRCAS, the reorganization. JIRCAS started using the current name in October 1993, when it was reorganized from its predecessor, the Tropical Agriculture Research Center. Forestry division in JIRCAS was structured at that time. So this symposium is being held in this commemorative year. I sincerely hope that with the active participation of all the attendees here on site and online, this international symposium will become a place for valuable information exchange and lively discussion. Together, let's move forward a future where tropical forests thrive and sustainable industrial practice ensure the well-being of local people who live on tropical forest and our planet. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koyama. Next, Mr. Zentaro KOSAKA, Deputy Director General of the Forestry Agency, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries of Japan, will give you his welcome remarks.
皆さん、こんにちは。ただいまご紹介いただきました林野庁の次長の小坂善太郎でございます。本日ここに日本農林水産研究センタ JIRCAS の主催により、国際シンポジウム2023強靭な熱帯林と持続的な産業の共存を実現するイノベーションに向けてが開催するにあたりまして、一言歓迎のご挨拶を述べさせていただきます。はじめに、本日ご立席の皆様方におかれましては、日頃より熱帯林を中心としたさまざまな地域において持続可能な森林経営に資する研究、技術開発および技術協力、格別のご尽力、ご協力をいただき、敬意を表するとともに、厚く感謝申し上げます。JIRCAS におかれましては、熱帯および亜熱帯地域での農林水産業に関する技術向上のための試験研究等を業務とする中、気候変動対策や農林資源循環、環境保全といった分野での技術開発等に取り組まれているものと承知しております。聞くところによりますと、JIRCAS さんのこのシンポジウム、森林林業をメインに据えてですね、開催されることってなかなかないというふうに聞いております。このように森林林業をメインに取り上げたシンポジウムを開催していただきましたことを厚くお礼申し上げたいと思います。ご案内のとおり、気候変動や生物多様性保全といった喫緊の国際的課題に対して炭素の吸収貯蔵源であり、生物の住処でもあるこの森林の存在がますます重要となってきております。本来、再生可能な森林資源は計画的に取り扱うことで持続可能に利用できる資源、存在であります。しかしながら、過度に利用されることにより、特に熱帯林を中心に森林の減少、劣化が進行している状況にあります。このため、気候変動枠組み条約締結国会合等の場におきまして、熱帯林の減少劣化への対策について議論され、多くの国、機関が途上国において、地域住民の生計向上への支援を含めた対策を講じている中、本日、このシンポジウムのテーマである強靭な熱帯林と持続的な産業の共存を実現するイノベーションに向けて、とても時機を得たものであり、多くの関係者の皆様方の参考になるものと期待しているところでございます。日本におきましては、かつて過度な伐採により森林が荒廃し、特に戦後ですね、大規模な山地災害や水害に見舞われた、そういった経験を有しております。その後、全国で国土緑化運動が推進され、先人の絶え間ない努力により、世界有数の人工林資源、森林の4割、1000万ヘクタールに及ぶ人工林資源を有するまでになりました。現在は、この人工林が利用期を迎える中、2050年、カーボンニュートラルに寄与するグリーン成長を、果たすべく、切って使って植えて育てる、こういった森林資源の循環利用に取り組んでいるところでございます。このような我が国の知見を生かして、熱帯地域を中心に森林林業分野、海外技術協力や二国間クレジット、JCM での下でのレッドプラス活動、等に取り組んでいるところでございます。また、我が国は合法伐採木材等の流通及び利用の促進に関する法律、これを2019年に、施行いたしました。本年、この法律を改正いたしまして、合法性の確認の義務付け等を実施する 強化を行いました。合法木材の利用促進に向けたさらなる取り組みを進めていく考えでございます。本日のシンポジウムにおかれましては、京都大学の北島薫教授と、JIFOR-ICRAFのソーニャ・ドゥイアジア担当部長により、基調講演いただき、その後、各セッションでは、さまざまな機関から熱帯林保全等につながる研究報告等をいただき、さらにはパネルディスカッションが行われるというふうに聞いているところでございます。皆様方の研究に対する日ごとの取り組みに対し、改めて敬意を表しますとともに、本シンポジウムでの成果が熱帯林の保全と持続可能な利用に向けた活動につながっていくことを願うところでございます。結びに、本日の国際シンポジウムの盛会と参加者の皆様方のますますのご活躍を記念いたしまして、私からのご挨拶とさせていただきます。本日はよろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you very much, Mr. KOSAKA. Next, I would like to invite to the stage Dr. Toru Nakashizuka, Director General of the Forestry and Forest Products Research Institute.
Good afternoon. Allow me speaking in Japanese. こんにちは。今度は JIRCAS 国際シンポジウム2023、強靭な熱帯林と持続的な産業の共存を実現するためのイノベーションに向けてというシンポジウムですが、この開催どうもおめでとうございます。また、マレーシア森林研究所、それからガジャマダ大学、それから CIFOR-ICRAF からもはるばるとご講演いただくようで、本当にありがとうございます。言うまでもなく熱帯林というのは、高い生物生産性と生物多様性で、それをもちまして、世界の資源とか環境を考える上で重要な役割を果たしているというのはしています。木材をはじめとする、熱帯林のさまざまな資源というのは、今ほどお話があったように、再生可能な資源ですが、扱い方を間違えると枯渇してしまうという性格のものです。あと IPCC の報告に見るように、森林は二酸化炭素の吸収による温暖化の効果的な緩和策として有望なだけでなくて、ヒートアイランドですとか、温暖化による極端な気候の防災減災というような気候適応策、気候変動の適応策としても非常に重要視されているわけです。また生物多様性の保全に関しては熱帯林が特に重要な役割を果たしていることは言うまでもないことですし、昨年の暮れに、採択されたクミ・モントリオール国際枠組みでは、森林の持っているさまざまな、生態系サービスを生かしていわゆる NBS ですね、自然を活用した社会問題の解決というようなこともですね、温暖化ですとか、それから防災減災だけではなくて、農業ですとか健康だとか教育だとか、非常に多方面にわたって生態系として、あるいは熱帯林としての機能が期待されているということになっています。そういう意味では、熱帯林の持続可能な利用とかですね、レジリアンスを確保するというような問題は、ローカルにもグローバルにも非常に重要な社会的要請となっているというふうに理解しています。私自身もかつてタイですとかマレーシアで熱帯林の研究をさせていただきました。持続可能な利用とかっていうのも、大きなテーマだったわけですけど、一つ感じたのは、やっぱり自然科学的な研究だけではなくて、いわゆる学際的なインターディスプリナリーな研究、それからさらに言えばステークホルダーを入れたいろんな立場の関わり方を持っている人々を入れたトランスディシプリナリーな研究が必要だということをしみじみと感じました。今日のシンポジウムのプログラムを見せていただくと、まさにそういう構成になっていて、本当に有益な議論が展開されるのではないかなと期待しています。 で森林総研はですね、森林総合研究所は JIRCAS とですね、タークの時代から1970年代の熱帯農研の時代から JIRCAS と人事交流も含めて緊密な共同研究をやらせていただきました。私自身もちょうどタークからJIRCASに代わる2年間JIRCASに在籍させていただきまして共同研究をやらせていただきました。今後ともですね、こういう共同研究協力関係っていうのはずっと続けていきたいと願っていますし、それを通じて熱帯諸国の森林研究者、林業研究者とですね、緊密な共同研究を展開していければというふうに森林総研としても願っています。本日のシンポジウムの開催は本当におめでたく思っておりまして、それをお祝いすると同時に、今後のますますのですね、研究所間、あるいは国と国の間の共同研究、共同的な、活動が発展することを記念して私の挨拶としたいと思います。どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Dr. NAKASHIZUKA. Now, please give us a moment to prepare for the next program. Now, we would like to move on to today's keynote speeches. Professor Kaoru KITAJIMA, Graduate School of Agriculture, Kyoto University, Japan, will give you the first keynote speech. Professor KITAJIMA, please.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance to be at this very important and interesting symposium by JIRCAS. So I guess I will start the slide. So let's see, I guess. Yes. So sustainability is very, very important, as all of us recognize. But I think at the base of social sustainability, food security, poverty reduction, we really have to have nature. So I love this Stockholm Resilience Organization, the Resilience Institute diagram, that at the base of social sustainability, we have to have sustainable nature. And I just jump into the topic. I'm sorry, I made too many slides, so some of them I will have to go through very rapidly. But some of the things I'm talking for the background slides is related to what JIRCAS President, Mr. KOYAMA, and MAF's Deputy Director, Mr. KOSAKA, and FFPR's Mr. Dr. NAKASHIZUKA, they mentioned some of the things that I'll be running through in coming several slides. Forests are particularly important for conservation of biodiversity and reducing climate change impact because forests are home to more than 80% of all terrestrial species of animals, plants, and insects. Forests are the most cost-effective way to fight climate change from climate change mitigation. And the biggest threat to forests, unfortunately, agriculture, which actually paradoxically include forestry. So AFOLU, so-called agriculture, forest, and other land use change. And we really need to have a whole package. In other words, we can't just conserve forests by focusing on forests. Agriculture is the largest driver of forest loss. If that's the case, really need to have a whole package landscape level solution, which I'm sure Dr. Sonya Dewi will be talking more again as well. So, I mean, there are many resources and I don't have to preach the convert. This is from the IPCC's assessment report 5 figure. I really like this figure more so than the latest 6th assessment figure because it really talks about the important contribution of green land, the vegetation, as well as ocean, equally important in mitigating increases of carbon dioxide. So natural forests, mostly what's going on with terrestrial carbon sequestration, natural forests uptake 11.7 gigaton of carbon dioxide per year. the number is updated according to the sixth assessment report. And of that, particularly important are tropical forests. Today's symposium theme, tropical forests, which occupy 45% of all forest areas, conduct 2/3 of the global forest photosynthesis. The number hasn't changed much since Beer et al. 2010 in Science. Global GPP, which is the total photosynthetic production by all the vegetations and the ocean as well, but mostly terrestrial when you talk about the photosynthesis. Anyway, of these, large part, 2/3, is due to the forest, and tropical forests are very, very important. This is a figure from sixth assessment report to actually conclusively showing how natural systems are removing carbon dioxide. Many of you may realize during the last 30, 40 years, every time assessment report of IPCC is released, we are becoming more and more confident. Climate warming, global climate change is caused by people who release so much fossil fuel, carbon dioxide from fossil fuel burning. So, natural systems, on the other hand, have already been helping removal of extra CO2 in the atmosphere. So the top is the red line is anthropogenic carbon emission per year. By the way, I said fossil fuel burning, but this anthropogenic emission include burning of forest, conversion of forest to agricultural land, etc. So anyway, anthropogenic human-caused CO2 increase is the red line. We can calculate this actually pretty well because we have good statistics about how much petroleum and coal are burned, and thus there must be this much CO2 increase. But actual value is this blue, so there is a gap. And this gap is the net CO2 absorbed by land and sea, about the same degree of distribution. But still, nature can't help us 100%. So we still have steady increase of CO2, and we have climate warming crisis. Some people call climate boiling, and I would say climate burning, almost. Many countries, especially Asia and Northern Hemisphere countries, have helped to counter this by increasing forest areas. This is FRA 2020 from FAO, Forest Resource Assessment. And it shows region, left Asia, Oceania, Europe, North America, Central America. In these regions, the forest area change in every 10 years from 1990 to 2000, 2000, 2010, 2010 to 2020 are increasing, so positive value. Forest areas are increasing in these countries. In contrast, forests continue to be lost in South America and Africa. But this red circle, does this mean it's good? We are in a global crisis of all these, including these forest areas that are increased by effort by planting trees. Even where reforestation and afforestation are accumulating land carbon stocks, fire can burn up all that carbon captured in a matter of day or two. It is really a major crisis we are facing. This is a paper published about 5 years ago by Philip Curtis et al. What are the key drivers of forest cover loss in different regions? In different regions, different colors dominate. Red is a commodity agriculture in Brazil. Increase of soybean field is main driver. In Southeast Asia, increase of oil palm and rubber plantations are main driver. In contrast, old-fashioned or new mode of shifting agriculture, slash and burn, is a main driver in Africa. But the brown here are the wildfire in Northern Hemisphere, but also in Australia. I'll come back to that later. Today, the symposium also wants to talk about forest and forest conservation in Asia. This is a picture, actually, these are pictures I took in Cambodia in 2015, not 2025. So, we haven't been 2025 yet, 2015. This tree has a tag. This was a forest monitoring plot. There are many 1 hectare monitoring plots set by Japan's FFPRI, Forest and Forest Product Research Institute researchers in collaboration with Cambodia researchers. But there is no forest because illegal logging started. And so that's actually pretty severe. Forest monitoring plots set by FFPRI are lost by illegal logging and convergent crop fields. I actually witnessed this. What are the eventual fate? It is intricately linked to the government policies. It might be well-intentioned to help small farmers, landless farmers, but these farmers, by law, if they colonize new forested, the forested areas, cutting trees and occupy for several years, growing cassava or whatever, these smallholders will acquire land tenure, which looks good in surface, but then they sell that land to industrial developers of rubber plantation. Commercial agriculture is driving forest loss in many parts of Asia and Africa as well. This is backside of Mount Kinabalu National Park, again picture I took some years ago. Unique and biodiverse forests on serpentine soils. Usually you can't grow crop in very special weird soil like serpentine soil, but by putting a lot of chemical fertilizers and using a lot of pesticide, you can grow cabbage. And where do they go? Singapore, China, some big mega cities in Asia. We need to think about the food supply chain. The entire chain is important to pay attention to. Logging and conversion of swamp forest. This is in West Kalimantan. So it's the way to the Gunung Palung National Park back there, and we had to walk for 7 hours to get there. This was back in 2010. But what we saw is a loss of large areas of swamp forest, where the cutting of trees, I don't know what happened to these trees, but this land, after draining the land, entire very thick peat is evaporating in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. And dry peat also tends to burn a lot. Many of you know this. Fire is so important. We really need to pay attention to fire because all the effort of climate mitigation efforts by planting trees can go literally into smoke in a matter of a week or two. It takes decades to grow trees, but it can be lost. So 2 decades of fire-driven loss. This is a recent paper, relatively recent report by WRI, and red points the fire. As I mentioned earlier, in Northern Hemisphere, North America, Canada, Siberia, and also Australia, fire is important. But you can see little dots here and there all over, in Brazil too. So we are in a crisis of negative feedback spiral, negative spiral. Forest loss and soil degradation weakens the climate mitigation potential forest, and additional climate change can cause drought and make the forest even more vulnerable. Of course, direct driver of forest loss and soil degradation is agriculture, conversion to cropland, fragmentation, but fragmentation makes the forest more vulnerable. How can we stop this negative spiral? How to ensure regional resilience? I want to go back and mention what is meant by the term resilience. It's not stiffness. It's not the ability to resist change. It's the ability to change back. So in Buzz Holling, he was a professor, special distinguished professor at the University of Florida. And so he talked about ecological resilience is not like engineering resilience. It is the magnitude of disturbance that can be absorbed before the system changes its structure to another state. This is from that book, Panergy. And he said these are the caricature of the four myths of nature, I'm sorry, is missing. So nature is not really all self-regulating and, okay, bounce back and forth, but bouncing around within a limited zone. That's the sort of nature is stable at equilibrium, that view. That's not true. The second view, nature imbalance, nature always converges back to set state. If this is a climate, if it's a soil, this is the kind of forest we have. Like Clement's, succession theory is this type of thinking. Nature anarchic. Okay, there is a little ball in this cartoon. So this ball, is it going to stay at the same place or not? If this is a dent, the ball will stay. If it's a not dent, but if a ball is perched on top of a hill, the ball can go anywhere. So this is anarchic. Lack of any kind of feedback cycle, so we have no idea what's going to happen, nature anarchic or nature random. The last one, Buzz Holling and his colleagues have promoted it. Nature is resilient. But this doesn't mean there is a one steady state or a conversion. There can be multiple steady state points. So this is a famous figure by Holling and his associates, adaptive cycles in coupled socio-ecological systems. So it's interesting, this K is carrying capacity is K, and R is the growth rate, intrinsic growth rate. So nature may accumulate or a system may accumulate to a certain kind of plateau, but there may be some external or internal reason to collapse and release and come back. Will it come back to this cycle, or it will go to another point? So I'm wearing kimono today. I want to talk a little bit about the Edo period in Japan. Long-term population growth in Japan. Japan had a civil war era, and about 17th century, Edo government started. So Japan's population growth has a famous, this logistic growth curve. Population increased and reached carrying capacity and stayed. But during this time, what happened is peaceful world, and a lot of commercial activities. What happened to the forest? Forests are overused. So during this time, new kind of forest management emerged in Japan. And Meiji era, another situation changed. Population growth, World War II, Japanese society and forestry industry have absorbed all these changes over the last 200, 300 years. So this is a kind of figure that you can see in old paintings. The forest is lost. It's a denuded hill because in the peaceful world, commercial need for trees was so immense. So as a result, forests are lost from this bare land. A lot of sand was, eroding into the river, and so as a result, sand piling up in riverbed causing frequent flood, and the beach became overly sandy, and people are losing their rice fields and houses because sandstorms literally are burying it. It was a horrible world, and as a result, people did something. Very strict governance by Edo government and regional governments to protect forest. And also they promoted Japan's unique original forestry. But industrialization in Japan after Meiji Restoration resulted in another phase of overexploitation of forest. And after World War II, another phase. But currently timber stock in Japan is increasing. And this is a famous source called forest transition. So as the nation become rich, they use forests to get richer, to gear industry. And then after a while, nation become rich enough and forests recover. This is not automatic. It is because people do adaptive behaviors to the changing systems. So during Edo period, exploitation forest, later the period forest recovered, Meiji Restoration, change of social background. And energy revolution, all these things. We do have forests in Japan, but can we put forests in Asia and the rest of the world. And as I want to come back to fire. Whether a forest should be burnt or not really differ depending on many factors. So they are fire-resilient forests. In this case, these are forests that actually recover back to forest when they experience fire. Then they are fire non-resilient forests that should never ever be burnt because they do not come back to forest. I want to very quickly mention about Florida, which is very sandy area. The entire Florida Peninsula, sandy soil. That's all I want to say in this slide. Sandy soil means very quick drying, and Florida we have pine savanna. It's not different, it's different from African savanna, but in very similar in terms of this kind of forest burns every year. Sorry, I'll go over a little bit. But then this is a forest that needs to be managed by burning every 1 to 2 years. Very quick, low intensity burn, and the trees adapted to this system survive, and it is an open industrial with beautiful biologically diverse. But if you stop burning this forest, it becomes degraded forest with full of encroachment by evergreen oaks. So this is forest that needs to be burnt and maintained by burnt. And in the world, there are many savannas, African savannas, which require fire and big animals. And if you do experiment or stop burning or creating areas that animals don't come in, we start to see closed forest. Biodiversity hotspot. My research actually is in Madagascar now. It's northwest of Madagascar. It's a little chunk of Africa, the 4th largest island on the planet, but it's really full of biological diversity, unique animals and plants. And we are doing a very traditional forestry monitoring study, looking at biodiversity of trees, and also looking at how people use this forest. Astonishing, over 90% of tree species that we detected in the permanent monitoring plot of original primary forest are used by people for something, and people have used sustainably. So it's kind of similar to Satoyama landscape we know in Japan. But unfortunately, this forest is burning up because of population growth in the surrounding areas, and that's a problem because loss of this forest, this Ankara-Fantsika National Park, it has over 1.4 million hectares, but this is the watershed for rice-producing region downstream. So the little yellow, I expand, this is a major fire in 2021. It burnt over 1,000 hectares in a matter of 2 days. So we are working to see what can we do to protect this, or what can we work together with the local resident. We decided to set a fire break. That's what I was doing 2 months ago in Madagascar, trying to talk with the local resident and community to see what can we do. And we indeed, 3 weeks later, we have forest fire break. So resilience, I would like you to think resilience not something stiff. It is the ability for socio-ecological system to absorb the change, adaptive change, and I think we need to think this idea. But as I said, the steady points are multiple in the resilient systems. That means we may have biologically diverse system with lots of ecosystem service, which can degrade back into another kind of steady state that is really kind of desert. So, my time is up. I would like you to keep this in mind. If you remember this, I'm happy. Forests that historically never or rarely burned are now burning due to anthropogenic pressure exacerbated by climate change. What shall we do about? How can we manage the landscape to prevent this kind of disaster that really can be a big, big risk that the whole world, including developed countries, as well as developed countries face? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kitajima. Moving on to our next keynote speaker, Dr. Sonya Dewi, Director of Asia Program, CIFOR-ICRAF, Indonesia.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor to be here for me and also for my institution to be invited by JIRCAS to provide the keynote speech. Probably some of you know already about CIFOR-ICRAF, but I saw old colleagues, old friends here that was associated with CIFOR and ICRAF before, but perhaps President KOYAMA-san, I think maybe we were invited because we are at the same age. CIFOR has also celebrated the 30th anniversary this year. So we are, maybe that's a fated that we need to work together more closer. So when I received this title of the presentation, you know, it was daunted for me. It's a very big, sort of broad topic. It's about global policy development and initiatives on tropical forests and sustainable industries. Where do I start? Where do I end? But basically then I start with a sort of taxonomy of what are the global policies you know, that is available at the moment. And then I'll take some slices of that that are relevant for ASEA and also that are relevant for us as researchers, as scientists, of how we can help with that. So Professor KITAJIMA has mentioned about all those problems, you know, which is anthropogenic and what to do about it. So policy is one of the measures in terms of handling or addressing those situations. So I come across a paper that is produced by Zentaro et al. In 2020. So these are sort of the taxonomy or the framework of how they provided 6 types of global policies. In the row, you see the actors, who are the direct actors, can be state actors, can be a combine between state and non-state actors, and can be non-state actors. And the column says whether it's legally binding or not. So this is sort of how they classified the global policies are. So there are 6 types of global policy. So there are state actors that are legally binding. For type 1, this is mostly multilateral treaty regimes, such as from UNFCCC, from UNCBD, etc. And then from this, one thing, this has been mentioned before regarding Paris Agreement, REDD+, and then Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We are going to talk a little bit about that and also what are the critical issues and how can we help. And then from the other types, which is from the state and non-state actors that are legally binding, these are the type 3-1. It's basically the interaction between government or state with business. Yeah, this is the transactional regulatory governance. And here I would like to highlight about the EU deforestation free regulation that has been discussed very widely and quite, you know, caused some stir and debates. And also I will talk a little bit of jurisdictional approach where CIFOR-ICRAF has been active on. And then I'll take one example from the type 5 of the global policy, which is transactional non-state market actors, market-driven governance. This is basically sustainability standards, which can be for timber, can be for other commodities like oil palm. Yeah, the example of this is, I think, FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council that you are already familiar with. This is a very widely used timber certification. And also you must have heard about RSPO, the Roundtable for palm oil, sustainable palm oil, which is really into food supply chain and sustainability certification. So let's go for the type 1 first. I will just go very quickly into the Paris Agreement and REDD+. So Paris Agreement is the legally binding international treaty with the implementation period of 2020 to 2030. This is ratified during COP 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And then the measures of that is REDD+, which is and can be a result-based payment mechanism, but really focusing only on agroforestry, forest and land uses. And then the second one on the type 1 global policy is Kunming-Montreal GBF that I'm going to talk a little bit about. So Paris Agreement, you all already familiar with, it's basically more than 120 countries ratified and agreed to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases so that we can slow down the warming, the global warming from business as usual compared to pre-industrial level, at least lower than 2 degrees. It should be maybe even lower than 1.5 degrees Celsius, otherwise we all will be in trouble. So for Paris Agreement, there are several strengths compared to the predecessor, which is Kyoto Protocol. Their promotion of international and intergenerational climate justice. Has been strong within Paris Agreement. And there are global inclusivity of all nations toward emission reduction, which is very, very positive. And enhanced emission reduction reporting and review. Yeah, this is also a key. For Paris Agreement, there's promoted more climate diplomacy, unlike its predecessor. But there are also weaknesses there. There are a lot of unclarity in terms of review mechanism, in terms of political rationale, and also technical issues regarding monitoring and evaluation and also verification. Also, there are gaps in mainstreaming negotiation decisions towards national level and subnational level. And then from Paris Agreement, supposedly the measure is REDD+, which is a financial mechanism, basically. The strengths or benefits of REDD+ is reduced carbon emission compared to the baseline scenario. This is the aim. And the scope is forest, agriculture, and land use sector emissions, because forest only is not enough, as Professor Kitajima mentioned as well. There are other factors like fire. So if we are talking about peatland, for example, that is an accumulated dead biomass, which is a huge carbon storage that can go very easily, in a few days fire, then a lot of carbon, CO2 will be, and methane will be emitted, and with that, all the forestry, the restoration, etc., the carbon that is stored will be, will be a zero-sum game, or even worse than that. And then REDD+ also promote biodiversity habitat conservation, which is really good. We don't really only look at carbon sequestration, but also biodiversity. It's really, explicitly stated in REDD+. And then last but not least is poverty reduction to the local and indigenous communities. This is sometimes, especially in the beginning, in the early discussion about climate change mitigation, IPLC, indigenous people and local communities are, largely missing, but now it is there within REDD+. But that is being said, there's a lot of weaknesses still, particularly in terms of maybe just the last point. We can see just the last point in terms of additionality, leakage or displacement of activities, and then also the formulation of business as usual, the permanent social safeguard are still not adequately addressed. So there's a lot of example where the projects that enters the carbon market actually, it's not in the way they define the business as usual is actually not acceptable, so that actually it doesn't show additionality. So they come with a very high business as usual emission so that they can actually show that there are some reduction while actually the threat is not there. There are many examples of that. So the crucial issue here for REDD+ is that policy and institutional framework usually is weakly supported by evidence-based decision-making. It's usually also in a silo, not in an integrated approach, and multi-stakeholder inclusiveness at the local and national level is lacking. So this is where actually researchers, scientists like us can really take into, can really contribute in terms of evidence-based decision-making, actually. And then the second one for type 1 is the Kunming and Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This is, again, is the magic number. It's 30, yeah, it's 30 by 30. Basically, what was agreed from the, during that conference by countries is that the target is 30% of areas will be in protected status by 2030. Yeah, now the question is then how that is translated. So that is good that countries agreed on certain target regarding biodiversity, but then the next question is how to do it. Yeah, so the critical issue is basically to translate from GBF into the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. So for this, policy framework at the national level should be there, including legislation and regulation. And benefit sharing for traditional knowledge, practices, and innovation needs to be taken into account. So this is one thing also that researchers, scientists can also help with the formulation of this strategy and action plan. In my country, in Indonesia, this is still very much lagging behind. So I think science have some space in terms of contributing to that. And compared to IPCC, that has been really used in Paris Agreement, also in the global, other global policies. The IP-based report, which is at par with IPCC, is much less consulted. So maybe this is also one thing that we should promote. So now, at the interest of time, I have to be very quick. The type 2 one is about the, the type 3 one is about state and non-state actors, which is also transactional, but also legally binding. The example of that is EU deforestation-free regulation, which you may know by this year, EUDR has been enacted. This has stemmed from the ideas that Professor KITAJIMA mentioned earlier, that deforestation and for deforestation and degradation, some of the drivers, particularly in particular areas, a particular region, is actually because of the expansion of agriculture to produce some commodities. Yeah. And European Union, as countries that are the off-takers or the consumer of those commodities, feels the responsibility of also trying to address the problems, and this is how and why EUDR is still there. It's there now. Yeah. So basically, EUDR regulates and mandates that producers to be able to prove that the products that they produce do not originate from recently deforested land or have contributed to forest degradation. And the cut-off date is 2020, so it's quite recent. But we see from CIFOR-ICRAF there is a problem as well with the forest definition that is there in EUDR. They pick up the FAO forest definition as the basis, yeah, for the EUDR. I would like just to focus on the number 3. So basically, one of the definition is areas still called forests, even though they are unstocked, there is no trees, for at least 5 years after clear cutting or after natural disaster, as long as they are expected to be regenerated. So this is basically more like the definition of based on institutional perspective rather than biophysical perspective. While we are talking about climate change, we are talking about reducing emissions, etc., that is very much really biophysical issues. So actually, we think that the forest definition that is adopted by EUDR could be reviewed, could be revisited and revised a little bit. Yeah. I will just mention this a little bit. So basically, because of the issue of red plus that is not very much taking off very quickly, then jurisdictional approach then becomes one option. Yeah? And this is just one example from South Sumatra, of which the provincial governor says that we would like to reduce emission, we would like to grow in a green way, but you need to help us. Yeah? So CIFOR-ICRAF actually works together with multi-stakeholders in this area and developed this intervention map, yeah? The strategy of AFOLU, agroforestry, forest, and land uses, where to do what. Like, for example, rubber, what to do with rubber. There are a lot of rubber plantation, an old one, what to do with that, how to where to revitalize, etc. Yeah, rather than expanding, yeah, going into the areas that is not productive. Yeah, that is one example. So with that, we also can show through the software that we develop, a framework that it calls Lumens, Land Use Planning for Multiple Environmental Services, we can show that actually the province can still grow regarding economic, but it can still reduce the emission if those can be combined with land use planning that is very much into sustainable agriculture, forestry, and land uses. So that is one example for jurisdictional approach. Now, the last type, type 5, is about the sustainability standards. I'll be very quick on that. Certification has been there, and we can see some evidence that certification can actually reduce deforestation and forest degradation, but often the benefit sharing is not there, the equality is not there, such that the consumer, the producer, like small-scale producer, doesn't get any benefit from that. And also, one thing that is very important is sometimes this voluntary action evolves to become mandatory, as in the case of EUDR. And with that, the capacity of smallholder producers, is still very much lagging behind. So actually, we can, as scientists, as a researcher, we can also contribute into that. So the take-home messages, this is my last slide, is that in order to be transformative, global policy and national sovereignty needs to be aligned. Yeah, those agreement, those pledges that has been made at the global level needs to be translated into the national context, such that it can be having a broad buy-in and can be implemented. And then common but differentiated responsibility as a basis of policy and action, including external financing and incentivizing, needs to be promoted. And we need to understand that there is no one-size-fits-all, even though there's global policy, etc. Yeah, global politics, local context really matter. And multi-stakeholder approach is very, very important. The principles should be inclusive, integrated, and informed. And last but not least, as a researcher, I think the data, technical capacity, tools, transdisciplinary approach in co-production of landscape or jurisdictional sustainable pathways needs to be there, and I think this is where the space of researchers and scientists like us can contribute. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Devi. Now, please give us a few minutes while we prepare the stage for the next program.